Hi, welcome to the channel Coders Arc, where we unravel the world of coding and architecture together. And today, I'm going to talk about Bedrock Agents. Now, before I talk about Bedrock Agents, you must watch my old video that I did on knowledge base, and this video is a continuation in that series. You know that large language models are trained on vast amount of internet data. Whenever you ask a question to them, they're most likely going to give you a response. Now, whether that response is accurate or somewhat hallucinated, it really depends on whether the large language model has seen the pertinent data before. Now, there can be some problem with that. Let's say you're working within an organization and you have some confidential information or confidential data that has not been made available within the public domain. Now, if you want to ask a framework that question in plain English, and if it goes directly to the large language model without the use of agents, you are going to get a completely unrelated and inaccurate response. So this is where the agent technology comes into picture. So first, the large language model reasons and understands the context of what the question is, and then it sees, using the chain of thought reasoning, if there are any Lambda functions or any functions deployed within the customer's AWS cloud space that could answer that question. And it uses plain English to first understand the question, semantic meaning of that question, extract the parameters out of that question, and does a match against any of the available Lambda functions within the customer space to see if it can use those to answer that question. I will explain all of these steps in details, but this is how large language models and Bedrock agents work together. Now let's dive right into it. So now I'm going to go to the AWS console, and from there I will select Amazon Bedrock. And from here, as you can see, that we land on the Amazon Bedrock service, and this is where I did a previous video on knowledge bases and I showed you how to create a knowledge bases. I'm going to skip all of that. But if you scroll up just a couple of tabs, you will see agents. Click on agents and I will create an agent over here. Let's give it a quick name. Let's say agent orchestration example. And let's give it a description. Let's create it. Now, let's give some meaningful description to it. This will demonstrate the capabilities of agents within Bedrock service. And I will use the default for creating and use a new service role. You can select different models, so I can show you the different types of models that are available. For the purpose of this demo, I will use Claude v2.1 on-demand inference, and there I will say the instructions for the agent. Please reason through the question. So here I'm just explaining the agent to please reason through the question and find a match within the available methods. If you cannot answer the question, please respond firmly rather than a hallucinated response. Let's click on the additional settings. I will choose code interpreter as disabled. I will talk about that in a future video. The user input is also going to be disabled because I do not want user to be prompted while the agent is in action. I will select all the other defaults. And here is an important concept of action groups. Action groups are what is invoked by the agent when it's executing. So let's add an action group. let's create something. Let's do a simple calculation of macros depending on the gender and body weight. So if you ask that question to the large language model, it's going to give a very generic response. But let's create a simple sample lambda function that will give the response a very specific hard-coded response based on the gender and body weight. And I will show that code in just a second. But let's name this lambda function, or name this action group, generate macros based on body weight and gender. And I can just give a description. And now we select the action group type, which will be defined with function details. And I will use the action group invocation, where I will quickly create a new lambda function, which is the recommended method, because it scaffolds and creates a skeleton structure of the code that is needed. Otherwise, you'll have to just manage and writing the code yourself. And we can look at the other two options a little bit later, but for now, let's choose quick create a new lambda function. And let's name the action group function name. Let's give it a name. And then let's add some parameters. So the parameters, let's put body weight as one of the parameters. So let's say body weight, description, humans, body weight. It will be a number. Required is true. And let's save all of them. And the second one would be gender, which would be, let's say, human being. It will be a string and it will be required. And let's save it. And now let's create this thing. And behind the scenes, it's going to create the lambda function, which will be invoked whenever this agent is in action. Alright, so it's created it. So now let's go to the action group. Let's click on it. And if you scroll further down, you will see that there is a lambda function that is created. So let's view that lambda function. And let's look at the code for that lambda function. So it's created some sample code. If you just ask that question now, it will just simply give a response. But let's make this lambda function a little bit more meaningful. So I already have some code that I had previously written. So let me just copy that code and paste it over here. And I will explain this code. So what's happening is, as you can see, there is a parameters field that is extracted from the incoming event. And this is all coming directly through the Bedrock framework. And from there, you parse that dictionary of parameters and extract the gender and body weight. And then just simply, right now I'm not even doing any complex computations, I'm just simply displaying that. And it is very important to give the response in this format. That's why it's very important that you have used the recommended way of creating a scaffolded lambda function, because all of that code is going to be available to you. So it's very important that you extract the parameters using this line of code, and when you're responding back, that you're responding back in this exact same format. So now let's deploy this thing. It says the deployment is successful. So now let's see, before we test this function with the Lambda function or with the Bedrock agent, let's test this function using a test event. So again, I also have a sample test event that I already have created. So let's try it. So important to note over here is that the parameters, when the Bedrock agent takes a user query, it sends the parameters that it extracts from the question in this format. It's all done automatically. You don't have to do this. It's all done through the framework, but this is how it's called. So let's save this agent event. And now let's invoke the function. And when you invoke the function, all it's doing is just showing the response. It just gives the response with the macros. Okay, the macros are carbs 10 gram and protein 20 grams. So it's pretty straightforward. So now let's test this function with the Bedrock agent. So now I go back to the Bedrock agents and let me save this thing. And now it's very important that you click on the prepare. So hold on, let's save this and save over here in the agent builder. And you click prepare. So essentially it is preparing the agent to keep it up to date with the latest Lambda function that is deployed. And now you can start asking questions to this agent. So let me ask a question. Can you calculate the macros for a male human with 200 pounds body weight? And let's see run. So as you can see, this thing is spinning, means it's thinking and it's reasoning through the answer. And as you can see, it has given the answer that based on the information provided for a male with body weight of 200 pounds, here are the calculated macros. Carbs 10 milligrams, protein 20 grams, fats 10 grams. As it also shows the trace. Now before I explain what's happening behind the scenes, it's important to know that this response is not by asking the large language model a question based on the vast amount of internet data that it is trained on. This response is purely based on the Lambda function which was available. So let's look at the trace. So there is a pre-processing trace. Then there is an orchestration and knowledge base trace. So if you look in the trace step 1, it explains how the Bedrock framework derives that answer based on the deployed Lambda function. So it has some text and it shows step by step on how it reasons through the problem. So first it takes a look at the question and then it says, okay, to calculate this, I have an available generate macros based on body weight and gender generate macros function that's available. This is all done behind the scenes. You did not have to do this. This is all done through the chain of thought reasoning. And since it knows that this is a function that's available, and now it needs the parameters that it needs, right? So within the question, it interprets, okay, the body weight is 200, which is a number, and the gender is male, which is a string. So I have the two parameters that I need to invoke this function. And then it orchestrates the incoming event in the exact same format like I had shown you before. So as you can see, it says body weight, number 200, gender, string male, and now it's ready to invoke that function. And when it invokes it, let's look at this trace step 2, and it gets a response back, and based on the information provided, for male with body weight of 200 pounds, here are the calculated macros. So this is how it orchestrates through that question. So I have shown you how test agent works. I would highly encourage you to play with Amazon Bedrock, knowledge based, and agents framework. This is a very basic example. We will show you how there are some APIs that are deployed using the Open API schema, where you have the HTTP methods describing the capabilities of an API. Now if you have appropriate Swagger documentation on those APIs, you can link them using the Bedrock framework, agents framework, and whenever you ask a question, it is going to reason through the Swagger file definitions of those APIs and determine which API closely matches the question that you're asking, and then give a response back. I will show that in a future video, but I want to end this video right now because this should hopefully give you a very high level view of how agents work, how the chain of thought reasoning works within the agents, how you can even modulate the prompts to get the right response from the agents. And in some cases, in this case, I had the 2 parameters that I was asking the question, but let's say you don't have the 2 parameters and there was only 1 parameter. So in that case, the agent will firmly decline to respond with an answer because that's the instructions I gave to the agent. Again, there's a lot of information in this video, but I highly encourage you to try this out on your own so that you can truly understand how the agents work. These agents are going to be the framework for a lot of the new systems that will be built. So if you found the value in this video useful, please subscribe to the channel. Goodbye for now.